Hey guys, welcome to our week 5 lecture. This week we'll be discussing chapters 9 and chapter 10. In this first short lecture, I want to look at ways in which we can get our employees to share and participate in knowledge management functions of the organization. And so we're going to talk about an array of things, and I think central to a lot of this may be this element of trust, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. Now, the fact that employees might be reluctant to participate in knowledge management activities in an organization is not that uncommon. So we need to try to figure out why employees may not want to participate, especially those who may have the specific type knowledge that we need. How can we encourage them to share what they know? Because this goes back to this quote right here at the beginning of my power slide, and that is, knowledge is a resource locked in the human mind. And so how do we get access to that resource that you may have or a colleague may have? Sometimes you'll find yourself that maybe it could be tied back to the organizational culture. And maybe the organizational culture is highly individualistic. Maybe it's tied back to some other cultural factors that might prevent employees from actively participating and sharing their knowledge. Maybe perhaps it's that lack of trust that I spoke about earlier. So I think it's important for us to realize that there are several factors that might help us examine why employees might or might not participate in knowledge management activities or initiatives. We talked about the culture. Could be highly individualistic, sort of a me, not we type attitude within an organization. And maybe I can give you some examples of that as we get moving along here. I think the key is for an organization to actively work to get workers on board quickly in terms of this knowledge management participation. And sometimes it may be a problem-solving activity. And there's different ways that one can look at this. And our textbook does a pretty good job in describing some of this, especially when we talk about the hoard, the share and the hoard dilemma, which I'm going to click on right here. The author takes a look at two different perspectives. One is a public good dilemma, and the other is classified as a free rider. Now, the public good dilemma, as outlined by our authors, basically deals with the fact that knowledge workers have access to, in their organizations, being considered for public good. So in other words, the decision workers face about whether to participate in knowledge-related activities has been compared to this classical public good dilemma, with the knowledge workers have access to in their organizations being considered a public good. So a public good is a shared resource by which members of the community or network can benefit from, regardless of whether they contributed to it or not, and whose value is not diminished through such usage. So the public good dilemma is basically you're participating, you're sharing your knowledge because it promotes whatever the common good is for that particular organization. Now, the second half of this is what the author refers to as the free rider. Now, the free rider is someone who uses the information that is shared within the organization under this public good dilemma scenario, however, does not participate. In other words, he or she may have specific knowledge that might further assist in solving whatever problem we're dealing with, but isn't actively sharing that. So he's taking in all the other information that the organization is gleaning from its employees, but not giving back and not adding to the contributions, even though he or she may have specific information. So let me just try to put it in a little bit of a simple context in terms of law enforcement. Let us say, as a detective, for example, I'm looking for a wanted person. Maybe he committed a serious crime in our community and I need to get this guy off the street. So I go to the patrol division, maybe I attend a briefing or two, and I share what I know. Okay, I may say, I think this guy hangs out in the area of A Street and First Avenue. But that's all I know. I don't know if he has a girlfriend there or what. But my information is that I've seen him in this neighborhood. And you pass that along. You ask other people if they have any other information. Nobody answers. But maybe there's a police officer in that back room that says, aha, I know what kind of car that guy drives because I remember stopping him one time talking to him. And this would sure be a nice feather in my cap if I were able to arrest this guy. So therefore, I'm not going to share my information because that information might be critical for everybody, the detective and the other police officers. But let's say for whatever reason, he decides he's not going to share that information. So basically, he is a good example of this free rider. He's taking information in from the organization, from members of the organization, in this case, a detective and others trying to locate this guy, but he's not giving back key information that he knows in the terms of potentially identifying the car that this guy frequently drives, which might help those looking for this guy, right? So that might be and serve as a sort of an example as these two types of situations. Whereas maybe if you're looking at a public good dilemma, I may have that information and voluntarily give that information because I know if I provide that information, it's going to help the organization as a whole seek its objective, which is in this case maybe to arrest this guy. So that's when you're looking at this, the share and hoard dilemma, the authors talk about this public good and this idea of a free rider. Now when you're looking at information sharing of information can be intrinsically rewarding. In other words, you are giving information and you feel good about yourself, all right, because you're helping somebody solve a particular problem. And let's go back to our case of the wanted person. I'm helping others locate this wanted guy. Sharing benefits to group level. So it helps all of us in that briefing room that day. So it helps my colleagues out there driving around in the black and whites, for example. Now that they know where this guy might hang out, they also have a potential vehicle description. So it helps everybody. Now, one of the dilemmas with sharing and information is that sharing may be time consuming in the sense that depending on the level of what's being shared, it may take a while for you to share what you know. And so it can be time consuming in some circumstances. But if we're looking at our little scenario here, it doesn't really seem to be that time consuming. So make sure you read that section of the book because I think it's really some solid information there as we go about trying to figure out how to engage employees to become more participative in the knowledge sharing process. Now there are limits to sharing and hoarding. And there are impacts. Some may be emotional, some may be fear. For example, loss of status and power. I think anytime you switch, let's say, some records management system within your organization, there are those people who have learned a particular set of skills. So maybe that's the same secretary you go to all the time to get information because they know the ins and outs and the shortcuts. If there's a new management system brought forward, then maybe they're going to lose some status and power because now they have to learn all over again. And many of us have to do that. So there's that idea of losing status and power. You're giving away your knowledge. You're giving away what you know about certain things. And you're not sure if that sharing of knowledge is going to be reciprocated by those who receive it. So you're losing that sense of status and power. Some might lose their jobs, for example. Maybe whatever you're discussing is basically going to eliminate jobs. And maybe that's not why you want to share information because I want to keep my job. I don't want to lose my job. If I share what I know, then odds are I might in fact lose my job. The other thing is you might be concerned about the fact that maybe what you know people don't think is important, right? So I'm not going to share. In reality, it may be very important from what what you might be able to share with the organization or the group as a whole. The hoard dilemma, hoarding workers avoid risk of giving away information. Hoarding will never receive full recognition for what they do. So in other words, once you release your information, it becomes everybody's information. And it may not go back to you necessarily as the one who provided that key information that led to the arrest of somebody. So if we go back to our example, if I say, oh, by the way, I've stopped that guy before and I've seen him driving a red whatever, I may not get credit for that. Okay, so that's one of those dilemmas you're going to have to recognize, that once that information gets out there, you may not receive the credit you think you deserve for providing that necessary piece of information. Okay, so that could be some of the limitations associated with sharing and hoarding of information. So take a look at this section because I think it's pretty interesting in why people share and why people hoard information, and I think it might help us out as we move further in our discussions. So let's talk a little bit about trust. How important is trust? So here are two pictures, and that happens to be me and my youngest son when he was a little boy. And obviously I'm wanting him to jump to me. And obviously if you look at the picture, he's not scared. Got a little grin on his face, but he's thinking about this a little bit. And how much does he trust good old dad? Well, in the picture on the right, you can see he does trust me. So what is it about our relationship that he knows that I'm going to catch him? And as we evaluate trust within the organization, and especially trust with the knowledge that we know and that we share, then it becomes very important. Because the more we trust somebody, the more likely we are to share what we know with that person. And so trust becomes extremely important, and it'll be a common theme now between now and the end of our class and several of the chapters that we have to hit upon. So we have this interpersonal trust, okay? Interpersonal trust that is something that we need to contend with. A lack of trust impedes the willingness to share knowledge. So the more we lack trust with a group or a person, the less likely we are going to be to share what we know. All right? Trust is defined as a willingness of a party to be vulnerable to the actions of another party based on the expectation that the other person a particular action important to the trustee. So in other words, what's that person going to do with that information I give him or her? Are they going to use it appropriately? Is it going to be reciprocal? And so as part of trust, we need to make sure that those individuals with whom we share, we can have confidence in that they will use that information appropriately. And I, as the giver of that information, know that I can trust this information to this other colleague or to another person. Now, Moranian in the book talks about personality traits in terms of interpersonal relationships and trust. And he talks about personality trait of agreeableness. And he says those who have this personality trait have a propensity to trust in general. In other words, you have this general willingness to trust others. So if you have this personality trait of agreeableness, then you are more likely to share with your colleagues than not share with your colleagues, because that's in your personality. You're agreeable and you want to share. You have this element of trust. What that person does with that knowledge becomes another matter. The only example I can think of is for those of you who might watch Survivor. There are those in Survivor that trust blindly. And if you ever watch some of the more interesting episodes, those that tend to trust as a personality trait, this idea of agreeableness, tend to get blindsided a lot and get manipulated a lot. Okay? I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to sign off and then we'll go to part 2.